I figured out long ago, you're never going to get rich doing this, but just doing something you love. You got to do something you love.
I realized that I had the ability to discuss with producers the health of those animals and the welfare of those animals and really create a difference. And I was really excited that there was going to be something that I could do that would send ripples through an industry.
The quality of Alberta beef is kind of, I maybe brag it up too much, but I think it's as good as there is in the world. And this antimicrobial stewardship has really brought it to the forefront. We always had good quality genetics, but now it's just taken it one step further, in my opinion.
Agriculture is so important, and just within Alberta, about 80% of what we produce gets exported. And it's not just consumed here domestically, it's exported around the world. We have clean land, clean water, and clean soil, and that's something that is so rare. And that's why our farmers, ranchers, and producers can be able to sell our product at a premium.
The strength and character of Alberta can be traced back to the origins of the family farm. And as we've grown and evolved, so have the ways that we've raised our animals. Owners, veterinarians, government, we are all stewards of animal welfare. And stewardship is a team game. It takes time and it takes commitment.
When we're talking about a true partnership, that true collaboration, each person recognizing the importance of the other, is when ultimately we get better care for animals, and in the food safety chain and in producing great food for people, in a knowing that it's safe, it's healthy, it's right, and it's done with care. And that's, I think, our end game. That's what we all want.
People want to know that their food is healthy and safe, and that's just a huge marketing advantage that we have to really put ourselves on the map as a agricultural powerhouse.
Industry and government must work together to ensure food safety, maintain access to international markets, and to ward off biological threats, most notably that of antimicrobial resistance. In reality, the increase of antimicrobial resistance poses significant threats to the industry and the livelihoods within it.
Antibiotics were the wonder drug in the 40s and the early 50s, and they were recommended as an appropriate way to improve the health of the animals, to improve productivity, to help feed people and give us a supply of cheap food. Probably in the mid-60s, 1970s, people started to become aware that resistance was becoming a problem. At least in Canada, the last 10 or maybe even 15 years, we've seen a significant awareness of the need for us to use antibiotics only when antibiotics are needed.
We need to think about using the right drug in the right patients at the right time for the right reasons, so that we're minimizing the chance of antimicrobial resistance.
It's a complex relationship. Antimicrobials help protect animal health and welfare. However, we know there is a risk that resistance can develop with every use. So what are those risks?
Often the benefits are quite obvious to us. We're looking at a clinical patient or a clinical outbreak in a herd of a bacterial infection. We make a clinical decision of which drug we're going to use to either treat that disease or prevent disease in a broader number of animals. The risks sometimes are much more challenging. What is the risk that using this drug is going to create that pathogen to become resistant? What's the chance that a bacterium from that environment spreads that resistance to another bacterium that ends up in the environment or in the food chain or in something that can otherwise affect human health? Those risks are a lot harder to quantify as a clinician, and admittedly as researchers, we are still beginning to understand some of those complicated risks.
Superbugs. What are they? Well, superbugs are strains of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi that are resistant to most of the antibiotics and other medications commonly used to treat the infections that they cause. Superbugs can lead to infections that are untreatable. As of today, 26% of infections are resistant to treatment. So, how do superbugs develop? Check out this experiment conducted at Harvard Medical School.
So what we ended up building was basically a petri dish, except that it's 2 feet by 4 feet. And the way we set it up is that there are 9 bands, and at the base of each of these bands, we put a normal petri dish thick agar with different amounts of antibiotic. On the outside, there's no antibiotic. Just in from that, there's barely more than the E. coli can survive. Inside of that, there's 10 times as much, 100 times, and then finally the middle band has 1,000 times as much antibiotic. And then across the top of it, pour some thin agar that bacteria can move around in. The background is black because there's ink in it, and the bacteria appear as white. First, you see they spread in the area where there's no antibiotic, up until the point they can no longer survive. Then a mutant appears on the right. It's resistant to the antibiotic. It spreads until it starts to compete with other mutants around it. When these mutants hit the next boundary, they too have to pause and develop new mutations to make it into 10 times as much antibiotic. And then you see the different mutants repeat this at 100. And after about 11 days, they finally make it into 1,000 times as much antibiotic as the wild type can survive. And so we can see by this process of accumulating successive mutations that bacteria, which are normally sensitive to an antibiotic, can evolve resistance to extremely high concentrations in a short period of time.
Luckily, we still have antibiotics to turn to in most cases. Antibiotic resistance is real, and failing to act will accelerate the rate of increased health costs and rising mortality rates.
Many people are aware of the discussion that's been going on about antimicrobial resistance, and it's become a very big concern. Normally, people understand the term antibiotic, which is a smaller part of the big family of antimicrobials, and antibiotics specifically are effective against treating diseases caused by bacteria. The challenge with that is we have commonly, both in human health and in animal health, reach for antibiotics when we're not certain what the disease is or we think there might be a complicating disease.
It's human nature to resist change. Food producers, veterinarians, consumers, we are all guilty of it. However, with more awareness around antimicrobial resistance and familiarity with the term superbugs, more and more of us are getting on board.
Antimicrobial resistance can or will impact all of us. We are moving towards the post-antibiotic era where we can't necessarily treat these bacterial infections that we take for granted, whether it be a skinned knee on my mountain bike, a joint replacement, or an infection in someone who's immunocompromised. We deal with these things in human health as well as animal health. And if we don't address AMR, we are going to move to a place where we can no longer treat these infections.
Confusion is created when food labels and fast food chains make public claims regarding antibiotics, steroids, or hormones.
What the public doesn't always understand is that meat in Canada is always antibiotic free, in that there's a requirement by law, always has been, for a certain what we call a withdrawal time, that the antibiotics are not used X number of hours or X number of days before the animal products from that animal are used for human consumption. So the public can be assured that there's no antibiotic in what they're getting. They're not getting residues in the hamburger or the milk that they buy, because the policies and regulations have always controlled that.
It's necessary to use antibiotics at times. We don't want to use too many, but at the same time, if it's going to save that cow's or calf's life, we want to go ahead and do it, but we keep track of that so we don't ship them before those antibiotics are out of their system.
I think that the general public really does care. I mean, the fact that we have defined markets, premium markets for products from animals raised without the use of antimicrobials, that people are speaking with their wallets. They want us to do a good job.
I'm confident with each of these programs. So whether it's conventionally raised animals that receive an antibiotic at some point in their life, I know that they're going to meet their residue requirements, and they're not going to come to the store and have antibiotic residues. I also know that with raised without antibiotics or no antibiotics ever, that there's going to be an option for those animals that do happen to get sick, and that their welfare is not going to be mismanaged.
The reality of caring for livestock in the face of animal health threats seems daunting. But it doesn't have to be. Truly understanding the risks is the first hurdle we must all cross.
It's really important that we have all the stakeholders from the human, animal, and environmental sectors at the table when we're designing strategies to combat antimicrobial resistance, so that we understand how changes in one could impact another one positively or negatively, and collectively come to our strategy to combat AMR.
Agriculture and livestock production have changed dramatically over the last decade. With advances in genetics, treatment and care, integration of new technologies, producers have been able to find new and innovative ways to raise healthy animals and at the same time keep up with increasing demand.
I've been working as a veterinarian in the poultry industry for 17 years now, and I would say in the last 10 years we've seen a dramatic decrease in the use of antimicrobials. The poultry industry here, being supply managed, has also been able to drive some initiatives at the national level where they've voluntarily reduced the preventative use of all antimicrobials important to human medicine. That's something we can be really proud of and has been a big shift.
I think that we have a pretty fantastic group of producers in the swine industry. They're always looking for innovation. They're always looking to do something better. And when they know that they're being looked upon to be the leaders in something, they really grasp that and they move forward with it.
We've gone to the next level of understanding some of the other risk factors. So we've spent a lot of energy and developed some fairly sophisticated methods for measuring biofilms on farm and measuring the efficacy of cleaning and disinfection. So those are the real alternatives to antimicrobials, our management efforts, cleaning and disinfection, biosecurity. So we've developed programs obviously to implement those pieces and then to measure whether we're being successful.
Alberta is known around the world for the quality of our beef. It's ingrained in the fabric of our identity to be proud of beef raised here. However, many producers are small, family-run operations, and this can present a unique set of challenges.
We've known Pat since he moved up to Central Alberta. He's been our vet for 20 plus years. He's really familiar with what our goals are, so he's constantly introducing new products. He understands some of the problems that we're having. We're always communicating with him, and he just understands what we need.
We look at Kim and Buster. It's an interesting sort of relationship. I started out with Buster's dad, Ron. We had some pretty serious disease issues. We had a lot of scours and calves, and so I spent a lot of time with Ron and getting him through that and working up processes and protocols that we could sort of minimize the health risk to those animals. Buster came back to the farm and Kim came into the picture, who is an amazing gal.
We totally believe that herd health should be a priority in anyone's cattle business. A healthy herd is the cheapest, most economical herd to have, so prevention is key over treatment. If you can prevent an illness with a vaccination versus having to treat it with an antibiotic, you're going to be way better off in the long run.
Buster and Kim now have a very enviable cattle operation and still do things off the back of a horse, which is something I've always admired. And they go out every day and ride and check cattle and have working dogs, and it's great to see.
Well, it's definitely a lifestyle, and it's one that Buster and I both love. I don't think you'd do it or could do it if you didn't.
Before, when antimicrobial regulations were more relaxed, it was convenient for producers to pick up the drug they believed they needed at a retail outlet. Now, they require veterinary oversight, increasing costs and taking up valuable time.
Back in December 18, they had a rule that all antimicrobials or antibiotics were pulled off the shelf on feed stores, farm supply stores, that sort of thing. I would say the fallout was really good. Most producers realized it would be a good thing. There's always a few that aren't going to agree with it. It did force a few people into having a relationship with their veterinarian, but the vast majority, especially the big producers, are very in touch with their veterinarians on a weekly, daily, monthly basis type of thing, so it was really actually pretty positive, I would say, overall.
When you look at the history of Alberta agriculture, good stewardship is to make sure that these 100-year-old farms and ranches become 200, 300, 400-year-old farms and ranches. It's something that you want to make sure that it's being treated in the best possible manner for not just livestock health, but crop health. We do it best here in Alberta to be able to have modern agriculture that makes sure that we have that sustainability going forward for the next 100+ years.
The biological threat of antimicrobial resistance doesn't just threaten an animal or a human's health, but an entire industry and global market that our province, our country, relies on.
Large threats to Alberta agriculture is exports and market access, something that, again, 80% of most of the agriculture products we produce are exported. Not having market access or having markets closed is a huge threat to the viability of agriculture.
We have been leaders in stewardship research and approaches for 20 years. Some of the pieces in Canada, like the legislative change to require surveillance for antimicrobial use and removing over-the-counter privileges for medically important antimicrobials, have been slower to change, but they have changed.
Veterinary medicine is meeting the challenges of 21st century living. Raising animals now doesn't seem quite as simple as it did, say, a generation ago. And yet, with breakthroughs in medicine, animal care, and operations, the knowledge available to veterinarians is the best it's ever been. But there are challenges of increased demand for veterinary services. It takes just a little more time to do things properly. And many veterinarians in rural areas are getting older. A new generation of rural vets is needed to take their place.
I see governments now really taking a good hard look at the fact that we need more people educated in animal health because we're becoming so diverse, because food safety is becoming so important, because the One Health concept is key.
The pressures we see in the field, it varies clinic to clinic a little bit, but a lot of it is getting the adequate veterinary manpower, getting the rural people that want to go back into rural as part of it. And then we develop pressures of too much workload, and so we're getting individuals to bring in individual animals to get looked at and still going out to the herds and the farms. We run into pressures with, again, prescribing, and we have to have that veterinary client-patient relationship. That's a good thing because it keeps us in touch with the producers, but that takes more manpower to do that.
Having a good veterinary client-patient relationship can go a long way to benefit livestock and producers. Veterinarians should know the owners, details about the farm, and have a record of how animals are cared for.
RVTs in the livestock and production industry right now are playing a pretty critical role in veterinary medicine specifically, and that's in the area of the recent regulation of the veterinary client-patient relationship. So part of that might include that they're taking a really comprehensive history and collecting data to pass on to the veterinarian. Part of it might be that they're filling prescriptions from orders that the veterinarians have given based on their conversation with the producers. And another part of it is just being the voice on the phone when they can't access a veterinarian or somebody that knows the protocols and can provide advice that's relevant to their specific herd or their species or whatever problem that they're having. So they can also be a real conduit between the veterinarian and their herds and their animals and really make that connection and keep that particular part really solid.
Some veterinary practices have found ways to adapt. Many have seen changes in how they engage their clients with more detailed histories and routine site visits. And there has been more engagement with vet techs, allowing them to provide service in a greater capacity.
We can't keep wishing and dreaming there's more veterinarians when there isn't. And that's something that is a real difficult reality where 25 years ago, veterinary medicine was mixed animal practices in rural. That's when I started out. And so now we're kind of having this transition. It's difficult for everybody. It's difficult for producers, it's difficult for the teams, it's difficult for veterinarians, it's difficult for the regulators.
We've seen a real evolution and our role has changed. So veterinarians are becoming part of integrated teams. Our farms are very sophisticated. Some of them are getting bigger. And there's a lot of money, time, energy, commitment invested in the farms. So we're working more directly with farmers, individual farms, than we did in the past. So rather than supporting at the program level, we're supporting at the individual farm level.
I feel pretty strongly, just through my experience with dealing with producers, as once they see the benefits of having a proper vaccination protocol, a proper treatment protocol, and proper guidance into the use of antimicrobial use, it will be very much seen as an investment rather than an expense.
That's been really fun and rewarding, and not just in terms of some of the biological improvements, but in production animal medicine that ties to economic improvements. So being part of the team that contributes to a successful business and the next generation of farmers, it's pretty exciting.
If we could glimpse into the future, what would it look like? Would we be in awe of where we're at 100 years from now? Look at agriculture and how much it has changed in the past century. Will our future be filled with as many drastic changes? There are already changes happening on grassroots levels that are making a big difference, and the changes are happening in places you might not expect.
We've seen some dramatic changes and improvements in the poultry industry, and it's an industry that's committed to continuous improvements. The next level feels like quite a big challenge as we work on Salmonella and Campylobacter management and really reverse engineering the whole system from a food safety perspective. So new challenges, but amazing research and diagnostic tools being developed. So I think we're up to the challenge, and it's good to have a challenge. It's a fun place to be.
Reducing our use of antimicrobials is in everyone's best interest. Researchers are working hard to further optimize their use, but what can farmers, ranchers, producers, veterinarians, and the public do today? With news of human and animal viruses in the headlines, we all must continue to be vigilant. If we make smart choices, we can continue to always be one step ahead.
In the swine industry right now, we're dealing with a lot. We are dealing with African swine fever, which is currently in Europe and in China, but sort of knocking at our doorstep and is a constant thought in the back of our heads. It's a virus that does not have a vaccine and it does not have a treatment.
Prevention is key when it comes to stewardship, and it's especially important in high-stress areas and where animals commingle. Industry has been adapting over the years to develop preventative approaches.
Some auction markets even have very elaborate processing facilities that they can, if you want your cattle vaccinated and stuff before you get them home, they will actually do that for you. So they've worked a lot with the producers because they don't want their quality cattle that they're selling getting sick either. So everybody's sort of on the same page as trying to prevent disease in the cattle industry.
But stewardship goes much beyond what's commonly called prudent use or responsible use of antibiotics. It goes through all the steps that we can do to ensure that our need for antibiotics is reduced and that we don't get diseased animals in the first place.
The major changes in the industry that we've been working with in the last 5 years have been the removal of growth promoting labels to the antimicrobials used in feed. The other thing has been the group sow housing, so sows that are living in gestation crates during their gestation period are now being moved to pens in groups where they're living with other sows and have more movement. We also have had a major change in pain management where we have amazing compliance with producers using pain management at every single castration, and all those three things together have been absolutely huge changes that I think our producers have taken in stride and really done an amazing job with.
Vaccination programs, proper nutrition, good engineering, ventilation in buildings, proper building design, proper genetic selection of animals, proper transportation, a wide range of management strategies that can be used to prevent disease in the first place. And if we do that, then we're not having as big a demand on the use of antimicrobials, and that's good stewardship.
I'm one of the executive members and a primary investigator for the Antimicrobial Resistance One Health Consortium. So we have brought together over 100 researchers and trainees from Alberta, as well as our broader collaborators across the country, to study AMR and ultimately work towards solutions for Alberta, Canada, and the globe. and as well the Genomic Assets Project, where we are developing this novel diagnostic strategy for use in livestock management that we've never had before. Rapid gene sequencing linked to our computer bioinformatics to make clinical decisions. This will be a game changer if we can get to the other side of it, where it's something that we can use that's field ready in terms of giving them results within 24 hours. The ability to take a sample, send it to the lab for rapid gene sequencing, and have information back in a short time frame is a large change for the industry.
Stewardship, by definition, means we take care of something that doesn't belong to us. In Alberta, we are known to be responsible stewards. We've always faced things head on. Not because it's easy, but because it's right.
Everybody resists change, and everybody tends to resist more regulation or policies. They feel like their freedoms are being taken away. But I believe the animal health community, both producers, animal owners, veterinarians, all realize the importance of antibiotics and the risk that we face by the continuous spread of antimicrobial resistance. Antibiotic resistance, the development of superbugs, is a global issue. It's not limited to Canada, it's every country in the world. And that seems like a big change in the way we've done business in the past, but it's become a necessity for our country to follow.
As we look ahead, we see the promise of a new generation of stewards striving to improve on the legacy of livestock production in our province. With our legacy of stewardship, our drive for innovation, and our passion for animal welfare, the future is in good hands.
But just doing something you love. You got to do something you love. And this has been it. And I try and guide new veterinarians or veterinary students, pick something you love to do. And so I mean, this is the difficulty, getting up at 2 in the morning and going to calve out a cow. That's sometimes hard, but it's okay. It's okay. Who gets to go and pull a calf at 2 in the morning? I mean, and so it's sort of the circle of life sort of thing. But seeing a newborn calf, that's okay. That's okay. It's fun. Makes it fun for sure.